All right, so my name is Cody. I'm an American, obviously. Here we are in beautiful Chicago. Who are you?
I know. I'm kidding. My name is Swen. I'm Ukrainian. Today I have very small flag next to my heart, but the biggest flag is always with my heart, Ukrainian flag here. So thanks for invitation to be here today. I'm very open. I'm very happy to share the real experience of the Ukrainian situation, the difference between Americans and Ukrainians, and I have a gift for you. This is the book about the war. Unfortunately, it's not about Ukrainian war with Russians. It's the war in different areas around the world. I don't want to mention the author, but why that book is very important and interesting. Because a lot of information on that book is hidden. I mean, it's not published. It's very important information with juicy details, what's going on right now between different countries, about the relationship between Trump and Putin, that they have a very strong relationship, and like from different leaders around the world. And it's very the same information that I wanted to share today, because the information that you see from the television, from broadcasting, sometimes different, which is right now in Ukraine. It's different realities. And I'm just a regular guy who wants to share the experience of my family, my relatives, my friends. And I'm ready to start.
Excellent. Thank you, Swen. I appreciate that. I guess everyone should know we do already know each other. In fact, I think this month we've known each other for a year.
Yeah.
It's March.
It's about a year. Wow.
Yeah. So we worked together for about a year. And of course, we work in an international environment. It's an international school. We have people from all over the country, from all over the world, I mean, and that's how we met. Where are you from in Ukraine?
Originally, I'm from western part of Ukraine, very next to Poland, and very interesting fact that my generation, the new generation of Ukraine, we never lived like during the Soviet Union history. We don't have that background. We are very different than our parents, grandparents, and in that part of Ukraine, at schools, we had the variety of options to learn Polish, like the second language. The first one was Ukrainian and the second was Polish. No Russian. Like in the western part of Ukraine, we don't speak Russian, we don't know Russian. We can understand something, but it's very hard to speak, which is different with east part and central part. Right now, when the full war happened, a lot of Ukrainians, they changed their mindset, and they started speaking in Ukrainian. But before that, unfortunately, most of the territory in Ukraine was people who spoke Russian.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how long have you been in the United States?
It's about 2 years already. I had the chance to come here under the very special program for Ukrainians, and I started working here legally. I had the work authorization, and it's very common program for all Ukrainians who was in Ukraine when the war started, and they had the chance to come here for the experience and like to live in the safer place because of the current situation right now. And I heard a lot of stories from international people and from Americans that, oh, Ukrainians, you have like a lot of benefits under the program, which is wrong information. We don't have a lot of benefits under the program. If you start working here and you have a paycheck, you have just work authorization and social security.
Right.
But the people who came here and they have like some struggling with the English, and it's hard for them to find the job, which is very low percentage of that people, moms with their kids,
Right.
and they have the benefits of very basic financial needs for eat and for live every month, and health insurance. That's it.
So
That we
there's
have.
two categories of people under this program. Do you
Yeah.
know the name of this program?
Yeah, it's you for you. You for you.
Okay. So there's the people, most people are here and they basically have work authorization, they pay their taxes, or
Of course.
basically just like regular American working people.
Yeah, like this year I did the tax form. I fill out the form. It was complicated, but I did it, and like I paid the taxes like you pay.
I don't pay my taxes.
Okay.
Okay, so I guess before we get into really the whole political situation, the war, and all these juicy topics, I think a lot of Americans don't hear from regular Ukrainian people very much. And part of that maybe is a linguistic barrier, but I think more than that, it's just that they get most of their information from the media, right?
Mhm.
And so if they do hear from Ukrainians, it's probably on the news. Maybe it's Zelenskyy talking or something like that. So I think it'll be very interesting for people to hear about your perspective, not just on the war, but on your life in the United States. What, for example, what does it feel like to be in the United States? What were your stereotypes of American
Mhm.
people before you came
Okay.
that is shared in Ukraine? And then after you got here, how did that change?
Very interesting question. I grew up on American movies, music, and everyone thought that American dream is super easy. And when you just came to US, the money, dollars are like a rain on your hands, and you became rich, and everything is like miracle, you know.
Yeah.
But it's fabrication. It's false. Like American dream. I don't think that American dream exists right now. Maybe it was like something in the past, but I noticed that like Americans are very hard workers. Like Ukrainians, we have that similarity, and you work hard, like very the full working day, and even during the weekend you work, and it's not very common for Ukrainians to work during the weekend.
Okay.
Yeah. So the first stereotypes was American dream, very easy, very successful. You have a house here, you have a car, but you need to work hard a lot of years to have that. The second is Ukrainians think that Americans are very energetic, very, open. How's it going? How are you? How have you been so far? Like that. We never ask people, random people on the elevator in the morning, hi, how are you? It's not common for Ukrainians. And when we see that on the movies, we're like, what? Why are you saying that? But it's a culture difference, But when I came here, I noticed like not everyone is super open, super hydrated.
Extroverted and talking to strangers.
Yeah. A lot of Americans are quiet. They like avoid any small talks. They want to talk, and I'm like, are you Americans? Yeah.
But in general, you think that it's kind of true, the stereotype, or at least the difference that Americans are a little bit more, they smile more and they're more talkative, ask you how you're doing compared to Ukrainians.
About that, yeah, it's true. Like your culture is more, I would not say polite, but it's like the part of your culture. Our part of the culture to be very straight and honest. For example, if you would say me, how are you? And I have like some troubles with money or with my family, I can answer exactly, oh, Cody, I have troubles, and you're not ready for the answer.
Right.
You just say, how are you? And you expect my answer, I'm great.
Right.
And in Ukraine, if you ask how are you, you need to expect like negative answer as well.
Yeah. So does it seem not very authentic? Because they ask these questions like, how are you? I hear many people we work with, a lot of the international students say, people always ask me how I am, but they don't really want a genuine answer. They just want me to say good, no matter what. How are you?
Yeah. And for example, in my building, the front woman, she's asking all the time, hi, how's it going? In the morning when I go for work. And for the first time, I stop and like answering to her how I'm going. And she's like, why are you answering to me?
Yeah.
It was just hi.
Yeah.
So not just hi, but hi, how's it going? Or hi, what's up? It just for hi.
Right. Yeah, that's true. Okay. Also, I remember you've spoken before about like the formality. People are they're more informal here. They don't, I mean, look at what we are wearing. This is a very American style, right?
Okay, I used to that. I like that style. I think my generation in Ukraine, you can see a lot of people with that style. It's super comfortable to wear cap, jeans, jacket, or like a tie, suit. But if you work in the office and you have like the high position in like some cooperative Ukrainian companies, you have to wear suits, ties. You need to follow that formal conversation, and you never talk with your boss like a friend. For example, you was my supervisor, but at the same time equal friend.
Right.
And we talk a lot about different things. In Ukraine, you cannot do that. It's weird.
Right. Do you think that there's one system is better than the other, or do you think it just depends on?
Be honest with that culture aspect, I prefer Americans because I want to have like equal relationship. And if you have a higher position than me, it doesn't mean that you can like talk with me like a slave or with like the poor guy.
Right.
It's just the positions. It's not a human relationship.
Yeah, I think that is an interesting part of American culture. I remember there was this French explorer that came to the United States, you know, around the same time as the American Revolution, like, you know, hundreds of years ago. And one of the things that he noticed was that people on the street, no matter what, they didn't refer to others with titles. Like in England, or at least the American stereotype of English is that they have all these titles, like Lord, Baron. I mean, this is very old English, but still, whether you're a doctor or a garbage collector, the idea is that you're equal on the street, right? Of course, everybody's not actually equal. There are, you know, privileged people. There's still wealthy people that, you know, have better lives than poor people, but you should be respectful to everybody. You still treat people basically the same. It's very informal in a way, but that's something that I like as well. But there's definitely plenty of problems here, right? Like, did you notice any surprising negative things about the United States when you came?
I think it's about security here, especially in Chicago. I mean, sometimes in the south part of Chicago, it's dangerous to go. I was working with accommodation with international students. I have the experience like to place them in the safe area, and I noticed like some of the neighborhood are very dangerous.
Right.
And yeah.
And yeah, what about the homeless population? Was that a surprise?
We have homeless people as well, but the funny thing is that in Ukraine you can see more alcoholic people on the street than homeless who smoke, for example. Here you can smell that marijuana, and you can see those people who ask money. In Ukraine, you can see like a lot of people who are like homeless, but they drunk.
Yeah.
And they don't ask money. They just approach to you and like, what's up, dude? Like, and start fighting with you or argument with you. They want to have like, you know, drama things. Yeah, it's
They're
different homeless people
Yeah.
in our countries.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So, do you want to stay in the United States if you can?
Oh, it's a hard question because we have a lot of questions right now to the new American administration. What will happen with our program? If we can stay or we need to go back? But how we supposed to be back if it's still war in Ukraine? It's dangerous, and based on like law system around the world, you cannot go back during the war in the country. But noticing right now and seeing the news every day from the new administration, they cut the chance to stay here for international people, and like they trying to deportate them to their own countries. So we'll see. It's very hard time right now.
Yeah.
I had the chance like to find the immigration attorney just to talk about like what I legally needs to do for my program, because it's like a lot of details, and a lot of attorneys are booked already because all Ukrainians needs to have answers, need to like build some future plans for the next month,
Right.
and we cannot build anything.
Right. The Trump administration recently was talking about revoking the visa status for all of these Ukrainians. Off the top of my head, I forgot how much. I mean, is it like 200,000, 250,000 people or something?
Yeah, it's a lot.
And revoking that status could mean that everybody has to suddenly go back.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. But in case if we have to back to Ukraine, it was very nice experience, like to work here, to have American experience, to work with people, to have that expertise and fulfill in Ukraine in the different companies. So we'll see what happens. But I like the experience here. I think my generation is very common with American people because we are very open. We are not like mean, strict, shy. No, we are different. We like to talk. We like hanging out. We love like we have a lot of American friends. Even I have friends in Ukraine, and they work for international companies. They work for American companies from Ukraine, and they have a lot of American co-workers, friends, and they have very nice relationship.
So with all of this that's happening in terms of the Trump administration considering revoking the status of the visas, what is the perception of most Ukrainian people? Like, is this a big headline on Ukrainian news? Are people talking about this? Is their opinion of the United States changing?
What kind of, like what specific changes?
Like, for example, the United States was supporting Ukraine more than any other country, at least financially and with military aid prior to the Trump administration. And I know that we had spoken many times, and you've mentioned that a lot of Ukrainians are very happy, grateful about that. Yet now that things are considering possibly changing, how are people feeling in Ukraine? Are they changing their opinion about Americans, or what do they? How are they taking this?
According to that sensitive topic about like to be grateful and thankful, we are very grateful. And every year we have like the president's speech during the New Year celebration every single year.
Right.
And the last president's speech was about Americans. It was more than 10 minutes out of 12 minutes in total. The Zelenskyy spoke about Americans, that we are very grateful, we thankful, and a lot of Ukrainians were crying that time because we really thankful for Americans, regular people who support Ukrainians, who holds Ukrainians here, who donate every single day to Ukraine. And we have like some opinions about the new administration, but not about just regular Americans. Because sometimes people and government, they have a huge gap of understanding and mentality.
I'm going to ask you regarding that gap, if that exists in Russia.
I don't think so. I think that, I spoke a lot with Americans about Russians, and my mission is like to convince them that Russians are very bad, and which is truth. And when people said that, it's just Putin, it's not Russians. Russians are good. They not support Putin, but in reality, they support. Most of the Russians, they support Putin. They love to have fights and war right now with Ukrainians. They don't like that Ukrainians are successful. They don't like that we are moving to Europe, that our mindset to West. They don't like. They want to have us like slaves. They are slaves forever. And when they see that we have a progress in Ukraine, and before the war, Ukraine started very nice developing. They do a lot of reconstructions. They did a lot of innovations. We have amazing IT specialists in Ukraine who works for American companies, and Americans HRs, they hire them. And we have different amazing talented people. When Russians see that, they aggressive and they want to stop that. So answering your question, if like they have a gap between people and Putin, they don't have a gap. They are one body. I don't know about Russians who are abroad, and I don't want to know about that, but about Russians who in Russia, they support Putin and his politicians.
Okay, I'll definitely ask you more about Russia soon, but while we were speaking about, Trump, you mentioned gratitude. We have this on our mind. Recently, there was that whole incident at the White House where Trump, JD Vance were talking about. JD Vance was saying that you should be grateful, and you didn't. Didn't he say that you didn't thank?
Yeah, today in the morning you didn't say thank you. It was today in the morning.
Yeah, which is why you mentioned that whole New Year's speech and everything. In my opinion, it's embarrassing. I think most Americans were embarrassed by that because we don't want to be doing things based off of gratitude. We don't want to do things so people look at the United States and say, "Oh, thank you," or "good job," or something like that. It's supposed to be based off of values, right? What is the right thing to do? So, that was pretty uncomfortable in my opinion, and I hope that Ukrainians don't think that most Americans are thinking in that way. Of course, I'm sure some are.
Yeah, according to that question, to that topic, I agree with you that like most of Americans, they didn't support that, but I got a million calls from my friends, co-workers, just
Americans or
yeah, Americans, because I speak English and they can talk with me and like to figure out what's going on from regular Ukrainians people, and they asked me why Zelenskyy was mean and rude with that position. I'm like, what are you talking about? What kind of position? I didn't notice that position.
like body language?
Yeah, body language. And for Americans, body language is very important. You can read that. For Ukrainians, we don't care about that. We don't pay attention.
Interesting.
And for us, it's cool position. It's like you're a leader. I mean, not dictator, but you're in a very good
Confident.
Yeah, it's a confidence.
Yeah.
You're confident. For Americans, it's like you protect yourself. You are aggressive a little bit. So you need to have more open positions like that. And maybe because of that culture difference, some Americans didn't get Zelensky's point. why Zelenskyy start talking about like specific details about the agreement between American and Ukraine next to media. And for Ukrainians, we are very honest and direct, how I mentioned before. So for us, it's better than Zelenskyy start talking about all things next to media. Everybody needs to know what's going on. Why you speak about Ukraine and Russia like in your office? People needs to know because we voted for Zelenskyy. He is our representative. He is our leader. We need to know we are just regular people.
Right. Okay. So speaking about support and everything, I have the numbers here. The U.S. has provided more financial and military aid to Ukraine than any other country. 119 billion since the start of the war, which is more than double what the EU has given, 52 billion. For the UK, for example, 15 billion. So I know that some of those countries in the EU per GDP have given a lot. I think Denmark is the most, but most of them, even per capita, is lower than the United States. And I think, of course, a lot of Americans are happy and want to continue that support. But the Americans that are against this, and the Americans that are kind of taking more Trump's side on this, their perspective is that we are being somewhat imperial, perhaps. Like we're funding these wars, which we have a history of doing. You know, if you look at Afghanistan, Iraq, Vietnam, we have been getting involved in these foreign conflicts for decades, and rather than fixing our own problems, we're playing geopolitical games on a global scale. So they feel like not only are we sticking our nose somewhere where we shouldn't, and that money should be spent here. That's one part of that. They also tend to feel that NATO has an obligation to pay 2% of their GDP per country, and they haven't been doing that for decades. So they will often argue that we should not continue to pay, especially more than 2% of our own GDP, for something that's on the other side of the world, European affairs. Why should these European countries not pay their own 2% of their GDP? I know, like, for example, I think Poland does well with that, but a lot of countries don't. So what is your response? Do you understand why they would feel that way? And what would your response be to those Americans?
Very nice question. We discussed that topic with my family, friends, and it's very popular topic in Ukraine. Why Americans? Not just regular Americans. Why American government needs to support financially and with the weapons Ukraine. But before I answer, I have a question.
Okay.
You said about like historically America did a lot of geopolitical things in different countries and participate in the war. What's the reason of that? What's the common reason of that playing?
I think most people would say that it's in order to secure oil, mineral rights, money, economical and military benefits.
Thank you. It's a very nice answer. And the first fact, I want to have that interview with a lot of proof, evidence, and we will put some photo and like articles, some agreements, notice on the video, like to convince people that we are talking with facts.
Yeah.
It's not just our opinions. Right. It's just the information and facts what happened between America and Ukraine in the past, historically. So the first argument, the first evidence why America needs to support Ukraine. In 1994, it was the agreement between UK, US, Ukraine, and Russia. 3 countries forced Ukraine to transfer our nuclear weapon to Russia and destroy the weapon. Because before we had a lot of nuclear weapons, and now if we have it, it's gonna be a different play. We will bombard them. We will play with such game that Russia plays with other countries. But now we don't have that nuclear weapon.
Right.
And U.S. was the initiative partner to force Ukraine stop, develop that weapon, and transfer everything to Russia and to destroy that. On that agreement, it was the guarantee that U.S., UK will support Ukraine when Ukraine will be in danger.
Okay, so military defense.
Military defense, financial defense, and other defense. What we see when the war started, I would say, of course, UK, US, other countries support, but it's not enough for us because Ukraine is not a very big country. We are smaller than Russians and we have less people. And our soldiers, they've been killed every day, every single day. And we don't have people right now, unfortunately.
Right.
And it's a very bad situation. I can share some stories with you how Ukrainian government illegal do some recruitments of regular people to force them to start fight if they don't want to do that.
Okay, but before you mentioned that, you said, you asked me about the question about the purpose of the military doing the American military doing these things. So, are you saying that the U.S. would benefit somehow in supporting Ukraine, not just because they're obligated to because of this agreement in 1994, but even outside of that agreement, is there a reason that they should?
Yes, it's the second reason why for America is the benefits to support Ukraine, because you are the biggest country and you support Ukraine the most, and when you produce the weapon, you produce that weapon in the US. It means that you support your economy. You support the people who work in the factories and manufacture that. So it's like economy development. When you do, because you are not transfer money to Ukraine, you do some packages and a lot of organization control that money.
Right.
And when you decided to transfer some weapon or some equipment, you produce everything here, you have money for that. That money comes to American government and economy, and then those weapons and equipments go to Ukraine.
Okay. All right.
And the third reason why US needs to support Ukraine is because of democracy. We fight for democracy. We want to be free people. We want to do whatever we want. We want to go to European Union. We want to go to NATO. Because people want that. It's not about only government. People want to be a part of Europe.
Right.
We don't want to be a part of that world,
Yeah.
And US, it's the best example of democracy. It's your value. And when you support the country who fights for freedom, who fights for the democracy, you show that you still have the same value of democracy.
Okay. I think that's a point that a lot of Americans will resonate with. But there's two things I want to say. First, regarding number two, the second thing you mentioned, which is the economic benefits of the United States. It makes me think of something that we commonly call the military-industrial complex, which is this concept that we start these wars or we engage in them or incite conflict because it is beneficial to our economy. We produce so many weapons, so many military aircraft, things like that. But despite that being beneficial to our economy, most of us feel that that's not a good way to make money. We shouldn't be engaging in conflict for money, right? So some people, I think a lot of people will not resonate with the concept of it being economical, because what we want to do is things that are based on values. And I think that's why the Democratic Part, supporting democracy, is going to be more popular for Americans. Although, of course, a lot of people are happy that, Boeing, Lockheed Martin, and all of these companies that make weapons and commercial aircraft and things can do better. But point three, you mentioned the democracy. Some people will say that yes, we should support democracy, but then they will point out corruption in Ukraine. A lot of the people on the right, like Trump's kind of people, the conservatives, will mention that the American media in the past, maybe a decade ago or so, often would talk about corruption or scandals in Ukraine, even like the media on the left, like CNN, MSNBC. Yet they noticed a big shift when the war started, where they stopped talking about those cases. They don't mention corruption anymore. They only try to gain support for the war. So they feel like there's some hypocrisy on the American media in the way that we're talking about these things, because the media is no longer mentioning the corruption very much. Of course, these people are just as biased as anybody else. I think they're picking and choosing information sometimes, but this is a big topic, the corruption in Ukraine.
Unfortunately, we have very huge problem with corruption in Ukraine, but it's internal corruption. We had corruption stories many years,
Right.
decent, and it historically happens with the previous generations of politicians and just regular people. They were working on the factories, they were poor. It's not excuses for them, but it was their mentality. They were poor in the Soviet Union, and they were working on the factory, like sausage factory, for example, and they stole that sausages and took to the family to eat because they was experience of hunger.
Is that a real example?
Of course. Or just, for example, my grandfather, he was doing some construction things, and he came home with some equipment to our house. It's corruption, right?
Right.
But I would say that it's internal corruption. Nowadays, we have the same problem with corruption. We have a lot of politicians who have very high salary, and they steals money from our internal budget, and just regular people cannot control them because they have a lot of protection. We still have some problems with the medical system. Corruption is over there as well.
Really?
Like regular people cannot do. Our medicine system is for free for Ukrainians. They don't need to pay. Like here in the US, you need to have health insurance.
Right.
We don't have insurance in Ukraine. But in fact, in reality, when my grandmother needs to have a surgery, and in fact it's for free, but the doctors say we don't have money for equipment to do the surgery, and we have very low salary, so you need to pay.
Wow.
And we don't have any choice. We have to pay.
Wow.
And it's very expensive, and not every family can afford that, and they don't have any choice. They're not doing that surgery. But what I wanted to say positive, when the war started, the full escalation war in 2022, and when all countries started financial support Ukraine, they start to control the money. When the financial package goes to Ukraine, they control the money.
Who?
For example, if Italy decides to transfer money, Italy controls how those money goes,
Okay.
and who is in charge in Ukraine for that package.
Okay.
And it works. We don't have like corruption in that system because other countries support the system. US control the system. So I think that when you mentioned we need to fight with corruption before we are part of European Union. Unfortunately, for Ukraine right now, we cannot do it by ourselves. We need help to fight with that corruption, and we think that when we start be a part of a European Union or NATO, you will help us to control with the same strategies those money, and it will be better.
Yeah.
But in the reality, yeah, we have very bad situation with corruption, but internal corruption in the country.
Right. And of course, every country has corruption. We definitely have corruption here. I think that's something all Americans agree on. Yeah. Okay. So, well, speaking of corruption and the war, you mentioned earlier about a story, or you said something about recruitment.
Mm-hmm.
Do you
Yeah.
remember? Can you tell me about that?
Yeah, I think like for better understanding, you have in the US Army, military, drafting.
Drafting.
Yeah, so it's the same in Ukraine. So like when the war started in 2022, a lot of Ukrainians who had like volunteering attitude and mood to start fighting, they all came and started fighting, like training, and then they went to the front line and started fighting with Russians. Nowadays, unfortunately, we don't have people. We, like as I mentioned before, we are a smaller country with a smaller population, and literally we don't have people. And the government decided to recruit, but sometimes it's very illegal. They are like controlling all roads. They stop like the highway, and they check every single car, because most of the people, like most of the drivers are men in Ukraine, and they can like drop that man from the car, not even lock the car, and push to the bus, military bus, and drive to the military training territory, which is very illegal. They need to check the documents, they need to go to the specific department. Before that, they need to do the medication checkup and examination, and then they need to decide if that person is eligible to fight or not. Unfortunately, nowadays they control roads, gyms, stores, all private or public sectors, and a lot of people like men, they just stay at home. They not go outside for many months. They just eat and stay at home. They work from home. They ask from the company work remotely, and they stay home.
So people can be kidnapped and sent to war. Basically.
Yes, they very scared to fight, because it's very hard to picture that you go to the front line and you will be killed.
Right.
Nobody wants to be killed.
Right.
And it's the reality of the situation in Ukraine. So we hope that European countries will decide like some approach to help us with like their military troops.
Mm-hmm.
And I saw the news like a few days ago that UK and France, they want to transfer their military troops to Ukraine and like to control some frontline sites.
Mm-hmm.
But most of the European countries didn't support that, because they think if they join, it's going to be the World War III.
Right.
But the fact that from the Russian side, North Korea already participated in the war,
Mm-hmm.
and like we can put some photos of North Koreans who be killed by Ukrainians on the Ukrainian territory.
Yeah.
Why the world are not react that it's World War III? Why it's fair for a Russian side to involve Iran's weapons, North Korea weapons, and soldiers, Ukraine cannot do that.
Right. Very interesting. Do people feel conflicted about the recruitment process? Because obviously the vast majority of Ukrainians support Ukraine and want them to win the war, but I imagine it must be very unpopular and people are unhappy that people can be kidnapped off the streets. How do people balance those two things in their mind or in their heart?
It's hard to explain how, but I think when the people faced with the death and with the war, their mind start fighting and protect. From the one side, they want to help, and we help financially every day. We donate. Even just regular Ukrainians who lost jobs, who lost a lot of benefits in Ukraine, who lives in everyday attacks. They don't sleep at night. They still donate. Everyone support our military and our people. But when the war comes to your home and say, Cody, let's go and fight. And that way you will start thinking if you will go or you will stay. But on the reality, the recruitment system doesn't provide that choice for you. They grab physically and Cody, you don't have any choice, you need to fight. And without training, without the professional background, you start fight.
Do you think that some Ukrainians could be upset with you for talking about these things? Because it could make Ukraine look bad, Maybe people won't want to support Ukraine if they hear about that. Do you think people might be angry that you're talking about the truth?
I think that it's reality and it's a fact.
Yeah.
And a lot of Ukrainians support that opinion that we need to say about our reality. And of course, a lot of people have different opinions and they will react negatively about that, especially that I'm a man and I'm still here in the US in a safe place, why I'm not fighting from there, why I'm not at front line like others. So we need to accept different opinions and just to talk about reality.
You did serve in the military as well, didn't you?
Yeah, so when the war started, I decided to join. It was territorial protection. It was from western part of Ukraine in my hometown because we didn't know if Russia will attack and occupy all territory. So every single city and town from the entire Ukraine territory, they created protection. And the people who wanted to attend, they had weapon, they had training, and I was serving. It was 2 months, and we did different tasks with the supervisors who were very professional. And before the war, my major from the university is technical and military translation. So I was working with military in Ukraine, and I helped to translate because sometimes the Canadian and Americans troops, they came to Ukraine before the war, not during the war. In Ukraine, we have the biggest area for military training, and they did some tasks over there, and a lot of Ukrainian soldiers, they don't know English. So our team of translators, they help with the communication.
Okay. So regarding this whole recruitment thing, do you know anybody that has had an experience like that?
Of course. I know some of my friends who share that stories.
Wow.
So
It's common.
it's very common, and every day it's worse and worse.
Wow. Yeah, I imagine that one of the concerning factors regarding the war is that, and even a lot of the people that do want to support the United States financially and militarily, getting aid to Ukraine, a lot of them are hoping that it finishes sooner rather than later because the amount of people that Ukraine has, unless other countries send troops, they're going to just get lower and lower and lower, whereas Russia can just pull in more people, and of course North Korea, as you mentioned. So, like, how does this war end? If it continues going without some kind of deal being made, how could it end well for Ukraine? What does the end of the war look like? Are people okay with giving Russia some of the land that Russia has taken, or are most Ukrainians completely against that?
It's a difficult question because nobody knows how the war ends. And like the few first months of the war, everyone was very positive that it happens very soon because we live in 21st century. What are you talking? What's the war in the Europe?
Right.
So, but still, like more than 3 years, it constantly we have war every single day, and the Ukrainians experience massive attacks, missiles attacks, and answering your question, I would say that right now, we are not accept the scenario of like to give them those territories which occupied it already because it's illegal. They occupied illegal, it's not their territories, and our people were fighting for those territories. They been killed because of their fights, and a lot of Ukrainian families, they don't want to agree and accept that fact that their sons, husbands fight for that territory, and right now it's Russian territory.
So they feel like they have fought and died in vain,
Yes.
for no reason because, okay. So what about Crimea? The timeline of this war, it didn't really start in 2022, right?
Yeah.
2 years ago. When did it actually start?
In fact, it starts 2014 because of the Ukrainian Revolution. It was in the capital of Ukraine on the very popular Kiev area. It's called Independence area, and a lot of Ukrainians came to the streets to fight, and because we had very bad government, pro-Russian government. It was President Yanukovych, and he did everything what Russia said to him, and they declined to start focusing to be in the European Union, to be in NATO in the future. They did all pro-Russian things. And after that Ukrainian Revolution in 2014, Russia, they start occupied Crimea and the two territories in the east part, Donetsk region and Luhansk region. It's two districts, two territories which connects directly with Russia.
Okay.
And all Ukrainians started to feel that the war started, but nobody around, like our neighbors or the US, they didn't accept that. They didn't pay attention what's going on in Ukraine, and they didn't know about that. Even when the new president, Poroshenko, after the bad president Yanukovych, he was asking, please help us. We need help, we need weapons, we need money, but nobody reacted. And when the full war started in 2022, fortunately, the world started listening to us and hear us.
Why do you think it was different? I mean, I have no idea.
What do you mean different?
Like, nobody seemed to react in 2014 when Russia took Crimea. And then I remember in 2022 when this started, people were comparing it to the invasion of Crimea. They basically said it's going to be the same thing. Russia's just going to come in and take whatever they want. But it seems like Ukraine had so much more support this time.
like just regular people, regular Ukrainians, we never thought that it's gonna be like the full invasion to Ukraine. We thought just that territories who already occupied Crimea, Donetsk, and Luhansk. That's it. They won, but they didn't stop, and they decided to invade the full territory. But unfortunately, like the government, they didn't prepare the country for the war. And even like a few days before the war started, everyone in Ukraine didn't believe. And even if like my friends from Europe, from the US, they called me and like, Swen, everyone here talks about like Russia will start invading you. And like, you kidding, you don't know what's going on in Ukraine right now. We don't believe that. It's Russia, they scare all the time people. But like in that day, 22nd of February, 24th of February at 4 a.m., I woke up because of bombing. And I called my mom because I was in Kiev, in capital. They start bombing Kiev. Because I was working there, and I called my mom at 4 a.m. and like, Mom, the war started. And my mom, what are you talking about? Are you kidding me? Or are you just kidding me? I want to sleep. Just let's talk later. It's night. I'm like, Mom, no, it's war. Under the window, like they're bombing me. They're bombing Kiev. And she's like, what? And she turned off the television at 4 a.m. and like all news start talking about like Russia invaded. And I decided to go to West, like to my hometown, because it was super dangerous. They already came to Kiev. And it was traffic. All people wants to escape, to run away. And regularly, the road, the destination between my hometown and Kiev is like 6 hours by car. But that time, I were driving 6 to 7 hours because of the traffic. And one time, I decided, I will be smarter. And I detour some roads and like start driving from the like villages, and I got lost. I didn't have internet, and I'm just driving, and the tank approached to me. And I don't know if it's Ukrainian tank or it's Russian tank. And I'm like, what do I need to do? I will be killed right now. And I just locked my car, went out. They stopped the tent because the road was very narrow, very like small. Some of us needs to detour and goes like to side. And I'm like, sorry guys. And but like they said to me, fuck off. And I'm like, excuse me? And we said to you, fuck off. And like, since from now, I don't know if it was Russian or Ukrainians, because maybe it was Ukrainians and they were very aggressive because I stopped them and they couldn't move forward and start like protect Kiev, or it was already Russians. But if it was Russian, why they didn't kill me? So it was the moment that I will remember forever. And now when I'm talking about that, my voice is very shaky because it was like I met with death. And I don't want to remember that, and I don't want to like people have the same experience, just regular people. Can you imagine the war in the US? Like you go and the tank approach to you in Chicago?
Yeah, no, I couldn't imagine that. Fortunately, we don't have neighbors that can do that.
Fortunately.
So one thing that you mentioned in your story about the tank, you said that you didn't know if they were Russian or Ukrainian, but the languages are different. There's obviously some similarities. They're Slavic languages. So really, how different is the language? And then in addition to that, how different are Ukrainian people and Russian people?
I'm the person who all the time consistently trying to fight about the language, because the western part of Ukraine is almost Ukrainians. I mean, they speak Ukrainian. Other regions, other cities, unfortunately, they spoke Russians. And I remember when I moved from my hometown to Kiev, it was like a lot of years ago, and I started working with very famous Ukrainian company, and it was nice. But when I work in sales, it means that I talk a lot, and a lot of people, when they heard Ukrainian on the phone, they're like, "Can we switch the manager who speaks Russian because we don't want to talk in Ukrainian?" And I'm like, "What you said?"
These are Ukrainian people?
Yes. And it was very unexpected for me, from like very young boy who all the time was in my hometown and I spoke Ukrainians. I didn't know that other cities, they speak Russians and they don't want to speak Ukrainian. They had a lot of influence by Russia at that time. But fortunately, everything changed. And now more Ukrainian cities, they speak Ukrainian. They don't want to have any relationship and connection with Russians. And still, when the language was the same that time, people were different. And my generation is the example that we are different. We are different with religious. We are more Catholic, like European countries. Russia is Orthodox. We are different in our culture because we have Christmas traditions very different than Russia has. We have different traditional clothes. Maybe we can put like some photos of Ukrainian traditional clothes. It's amazing. And we are very open-minded, like with West culture. We more educated, I think, and it's a fact that we have more universities. We have more people who wants to study, who wants to develop their skills after high school. And we have more international companies in Ukraine, which means we practice English. So when I came to US, I already know English. It was not a struggle for me to work with Americans and to develop my career here. And when I faced with Russians here in Chicago, they speak different. I mean, it's not about language. It's about emotions. It's about their attitude. They don't like some American benefits here. They don't like LGBT community. They don't like very progressive things, which is very common for the US. And all the time I'm like, so why you came here if you don't like it? Go home to Russia. And but with the language, it was a conflict in Ukraine. And nowadays, people who doesn't want to switch their language, we have conflicts. And Ukrainians who speak Ukrainian can approach to some Ukrainians who speak Russian and say, you cannot speak Russian right now because of the war. And they're like, you are not the best person to say that. And they just start arguing, you know? And for us, language is super sensitive things because Russia occupied Ukraine and all the time it was like enemy for us. And for example, if for US Spanish, it's not a sensitive topic, and a lot of Americans speak Spanish. In Ukraine, Russian language is like very aggressive, and people don't like to hear Russians in Ukraine anymore.
Did you hear about this recent news? Apparently the Trump administration is trying to make English the national language in the United States.
Yeah.
To me, it's like, that's fundamentally un-American because our history is that we never had a national language, we never had a national religion. The thing that ties us together is democratic values, the Bill of Rights. So it seems, to me, that's kind of devastating. It's sad that it seems that's part of the United States that I've identified with. I was always proud about that there's no national language. And I think imposing a language on people, we actually see this in China, for example. I used to be very obsessed with China's political situation, history. I lived there, and they are trying to expand Mandarin, the Beijing dialect Mandarin, and I'll teach it in our own schools and kind of erase the culture of the minorities like in Inner Mongolia or in Xinjiang or Tibet by forcing the students to learn Mandarin. So imposing a language does erase cultures and will bring people into your government and make them more like your country. But of course, I think people should be able to speak whatever language they normally speak.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't that part of why Russia invaded Luhansk, and these regions had a lot of Russian-speaking people, right?
Putin says that all the time, and one of the reasons why he occupied those territories, because he said people who live there, they felt unsecure because Ukrainians who spoke Ukrainians had argument with those people, and so he decided to save them, to protect them from Nazis.
Nazis?
Yeah. He said, he called Ukrainians who speak Ukrainians with our native language, we are Nazis.
Yeah.
And it's insane because we protect our language. And when you said that the people can speak the language they want, it's true. But in the past, before the war, when I had the argument with Ukrainians who spoke Russians, I didn't start argument first. When they start attacking me,
Right.
Swen, you're in Kiev. In Kiev, we talk Russian. Why you came from western part and speak Ukrainian? You need to be more modern, more popular. Speak Russian. I'm like, no, my language is Ukrainian. My family, my relatives, everyone spoke Ukrainian all the time. So it was the reason why I keep fighting with them. I've never touched them first.
Right.
But from their side, if they're watching the interview right now, they have their own opinion. They think that all Ukrainians who speak Ukrainian, they judge them all the time. They fight with them, which is not truth. And they never thought that they were first with Ukrainians who speak Ukrainian. It's a conflict, but it's internal conflict between Ukrainians.
Right.
But unfortunately, because of the war, they started to think that language is the connection. Because when you speak that language, you think in that language, and you have different mindsets. So they started to switch. But a lot of old people, they never switch the language. For them, it's super hard. And for us, for me, for my family, it's very understandable. We cannot afford, we cannot ask them to switch because it's very hard for them.
Right. And there's a big difference between having a language that only has, a few million speakers, which is under threat, and wanting to keep that language alive. We know languages die all the time,
Mm-hmm.
extinct languages. There's a difference between that and then trying to impose this language that is part of a massive country, whether it be Mandarin or Russian or English, trying to erase, cultures and smaller minority cultures. There's a difference. So I understand why you want to speak Ukrainian and keep that alive. And it's ironic that Putin and that Russians call many Ukrainians Nazis because, I mean, Hitler, didn't he use the same tactic when he went into like the Czechoslovakia? The Sudetenland was this like German-speaking part of Czechoslovakia. That was the first place that they went into, I think, even before Poland, I believe. So very interesting.
Yeah, but unfortunately, I've faced with a lot of situation here in the US when I'm walking on the street and I heard Russian from the people and I cannot distinguish them. I don't know if they are Ukrainians or they Russians. And if they Russians, I've never started communicate with them. But if they were Ukrainians, I'm like, hi, maybe I can help you with something. So it's hard to know based on the language.
The language is quite similar.
And they need to know, they need to start thinking when you're abroad and you speak Russians, all international people who understand Russian, they think you're Russian. You're not Ukrainians.
Yeah, they just assume any Slavic language.
Yes.
Is there a language that's more closely related to Ukrainian than Russian?
A lot of people think that Russian is very common to Ukrainians, but my generation, we cannot speak Russian. Like it's not our native language, and it's a fact that Serbian more closer to Ukrainian, Polish closer to Ukrainian, and we can put like some facts here on the video because why people think that? Because all of Ukrainians speak Russians. And they think that it's super the same language, but it's different. It's almost different. We have different grammar. We have the same alphabet, almost the same alphabet.
Cyrillic.
Yeah, but the grammar, words, and like expression, very different. Our language, Ukrainian language, is more melodic, and I can show you the list of the countries in Europe which are most melodical. The first position is Italian, the second is Ukrainian, and Russian not in that list because Russian language is not melodical. It's very strict and very like strong, you know, like cut. We can play the game like to distinguish our languages, and like it's gonna be interesting for you to know which one is Ukrainian, which one is Russian, okay?
Okay, lots of pressure.
Yeah, so I will sing the song if you don't mind, okay? I know the professional singer and my voice is not like very nice, but sorry viewers. Okay, I will not say logically the language, and it's gonna be two songs. One of Russian, one of them in Ukrainian, okay? Чому розплетена коса, а на очах бринить сльоза is the first one, and the second one. Мы гордость, мы вечность друг друга.
They both sounded melodical to me. They sounded good. I would say the first one seemed more melodical.
So you think that the first one is Ukrainian?
Yeah. No?
You're right.
Okay, good. Good. Okay,
Yeah.
Interesting. Yet at the same time, you say that sometimes you like when you hear some people in the street, you don't know the difference. I imagine that's for very short, brief things.
Yeah, like it's the first impression. But then when I see how they talk, like the accent, because Russian accent, it's like luxury accent like that. I talk like that, you know, I also accent like that. Oh, no, no. And Ukrainian, they speak Russians like differently.
Okay.
When I see how they move, like how their behavior is, I can say if they're Russian or Ukrainian. Because if you meet Russian here in the US, probably they are from Moscow or from St. Petersburg. It's two cities which is very popular for international people. Other cities in Russia are abandoned. They don't have anything. It's like villages poor people, a lot of vodka, balalaika. It's like their national instrument they play, and that's it.
Yeah.
They occupy a lot of territories, but they don't develop that cities. They occupy Crimea, and we can like show right now before occupation how the Crimea looks like, and after. Luhansk, Donetsk, and all cities are occupied right now by Russia. They look different. They just completely abandoned and destroyed it.
Yeah.
It was life there. It was happiness there, and now it's nothing.
Right. They're also bringing Ukrainian children into Russia to try to indoctrinate them, turn them Russian, right? Haven't they been kidnapping children?
Yeah, they sold kids and they start recording some videos for Russian propaganda, for like international media, and for Russian just regular people those kids are very happy in the Russian schools. They're happier than they were in Ukraine, which is not truth. And it's very strong pain that we feel Ukrainians, because kids are the most important aspect in our for everyone, and they stole them and they started spreading that propaganda to their little mindset.
So
Yeah.
I don't think we'll have much more time because somebody's making a lot of noise outside. Oh, there's like a parade coming. Protest.
Okay.
Oh, it's a Palestinian
Okay.
support thing. Do you think that these two countries can be friendly neighbors in the future?
I think that I wanted to say for Americans and to remember that my generation and our future next generation, we don't want to be friends with Russians because of different facts and consequences. But maybe 5 future generation ahead, maybe they will have some relationship if the war ends. Because historically we can see that we are friends with German right now, right? And nobody remember that because it's a new generation. They didn't have any experience
With the war?
with the war.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I don't think we'll be able to continue recording much because of this, all of this noise. Is there anything, final words you would like to say?
I want to say that we are very thankful and grateful for American regular people who support Ukraine, who will support for the future, not only with financial and weapons, but mentality, with support to be friends with us, because we wanted to be friends with Americans, not with Russian. And please donate for Ukraine. It's very important to support our economy and to support our people who fight with Russia, because we fight for freedom and to be a democracy, to have a democracy in our country as well.
Thank you, Swen.
Thank you, Cody.
Perhaps, if anybody watches this, perhaps they can ask some questions. Maybe we can have another conversation in the future.
Yeah, we have a lot of topics to discuss in the future, so just share your thoughts, your feedback, likes, subscribe for that channel that you will upload the interview, and to be active, because I know they were professional with YouTube, but I think more comments, more likes, and more views generate more often in the algorithm of YouTube to see that video.
Yeah. Hopefully this gets seen. I don't have a YouTube channel really, so we'll start here.
Okay, thank you.
Swen.
Thank you.